Hello and welcome and assalamu alaikum. Today is the book day. I'm going to discuss a book, and the book which I have actually brought today is one of the most popular, one of the most influential, one of the most actually controversial, and even if not one of the most read. People actually read less books than they talk about it, even if it's not one of the most read, but still one of the most talked about books in last 30 years. Now that is quite a suspense. Let's see. And I have a feeling that most of you would be knowing about this. This is a book, Clash of Civilizations. Clash of Civilizations by Samuel P. Huntington. A lot of you have really asked me in messages to discuss this book and to actually give opinion if for and against. That is, let's wait for that. But before that, Clash of Civilizations, which came in this book, a theory which became an idea which became an ideology which actually became policy or policies for so many countries and so many nations and so many communities, and has affected millions, I would say billions of people. And in last 30 years, this book has been rejected, this idea has been rejected, praised, accepted, embraced, a lot of activity around it. And people from being the head of the states to the common man, everyone really has been discussing it whenever there is an issue of international relations, whenever there is an issue of Islam, whenever there is an issue of wars between the countries, whenever there is an issue of extremism. So a lot of discussion is that the US is actually invading countries because of Clash of Civilizations. There is Islamophobia because of Clash of Civilization. A lot of these things are true, but are they because of this, or there is another reason? We shall discuss that. And besides this, I will also try to assist or help or explain how to approach a subject or an idea or an ideology. Let's start with the concept. And the first starting point of any concept or study any idea or a theory is to actually look at the work of the author. Most of the times, I think almost all the time, no big idea is actually given in just one work. It is possible that one work becomes very popular, but it doesn't mean that it is only restricted to one. Most of the time, the writer or the author, actually there are most of the time there are more than one. But even if there is one, their whole work, life's academic work is actually encapsulates the model, and the model is expanded and extended, sometimes refuted, sometimes negated, sometimes the author actually develops and evolves and incorporates new ideas, sometimes drops few. So this is a work in progress. Huntington, interestingly, was not really known for the work which surrounds like civilizations and cultures and actually wars to start with. Huntington started very early after Second World War, lived till 2008, and his first book came in 1955, a very interesting and a very influential book that was titled Soldier and the State. The book was around civil-military relations, and it really gave the theory that about which kind of militaries are involved in politics. Quite an interesting issue, but let's leave it that for some time later. And Huntington then keeps on developing his work around political theories and political order, and his late 60s book was Political Order in Changing Societies, which actually developed the ideas around which he explored that how political institutions are developed in those societies mostly which are like new or transitional or post-colonial societies. In 80s there was another book on democracies. I have not come across it, but it was also very positively reviewed. But now fast forward, we are in 90s, and suddenly Huntington comes up with Clash of Civilization. How did that happen? That actually didn't happen with the book. Most of the people actually, a lot of learned people actually do not know that. That actually happened with the paper, and that paper was published in 1993. and that paper was published in a journal or a magazine, if I can call it, Foreign Affairs. Foreign Affairs is a very influential publication. It is published by the Council of Foreign Relations from New York. It is said to be, known to be mostly for US policymakers, but now covers of course world politics as well, and also known to be close to US establishments. Primary audience has been the US policy makers. In 93, and also just to add that Foreign Affairs is of course a very influential journal, but as compared to the other journals like research oriented like American Political Science Review or International Security, it is less comparatively towards research and more towards policy. So in 1993 a paper is published which is titled Clash of Civilization, but I've seen very educated people actually missing a very important point. And what is the important point? Important point is a question mark. The paper was titled Clash of Civilizations and a question mark. Huntington was not really certain, actually he is not really certain in this paper, and if one goes through that, he is kind of cautious, he is at times careful, he is uncertain, he is of course saying with authority that this will have happen, but he's choosing his words very carefully. So he is not really saying that Clash of Civilization has happened or is happening or is going to happen. And he also acknowledges that he is not the first person who came up with the term Clash of Civilization. It was actually Bernard Lewis. And Bernard Lewis, who comes up from the historical background, of course is one of the most known historians of Islamic history. And Bernard Lewis of course in 1992 he mentions Clash of Civilization, but also adds a word perhaps. And Bernard Lewis said there is no less than a clash of civilization, the perhaps irrational but surely historical reaction of an ancient rival against other. So Huntington comes up with Clash of Civilization, puts a question mark which is mostly ignored, and the paper is very popular. The paper is popular with the US policymakers, with the international policymakers who have been grappling to make sense of the world post Cold War, and now they suddenly, because most of the researchers or policymakers or academics fall into the trap of bipolar world. So one pole, two poles. So they don't understand they understand it, but it's convenient to actually divide into pockets. So they really embrace it, and it just becomes very popular. And within a few years, Huntington is now an expert of international relations as well as religions, because most of the civilization now stem from the religion. And in 1996, he comes up with this word, and now he's very certain, he's very sure, and he explains his theory. What is his theory and what is Clash of Civilization? Again, I have really, people when say for or against, I ask what does he say? Maybe right or wrong, but what are his views and how does he support views? I am mostly I do not find satisfactory response on that, so I will try to explain what I gathered from the book. There are 5 points, 5 main points, I think so. First point is that there are civilizations. These civilizations are the highest order of cultures, and these cultures are not really totally cohesive, but they converge and form a uniform civilization. And there are 8 of those, and these are Western and Japanese and Islamic and African and Latin American, etc. Second point is that the conflicts which are happening and going to happen are not based on the states fighting each other or the countries fighting each other, but civilizations would be pitched against each other. That is the second point. Third point is that this competition or conflict would be on the fault lines between civilizations. So there will be fault lines. These fault lines will emerge from what he calls torn countries. For example, he calls Turkey a torn country, Lebanon a torn country, actually Mexico a torn country too. And on those countries there will be conflict which will emerge. Fourthly, he says that these conflicts will aggravate because there is West versus the rest. So West has become very progressed, very prosperous. On the other hand, other civilizations have actually fallen behind, both in ideology as well as in economy. And finally, finally, the most controversial part is that he kind of leans towards it. He leads to the discussion towards this thing, is that the most apparent conflict is between the West and the Islamic civilization, and the most controversial and the most well-known statement from this work is that Islam has bloody borders and bloody innards, by which he means that on the fault lines or on the borders of Islam, like where the Islamic bloc meets the Western bloc, and within the Islamic bloc there are such conflicts which results into the larger conflicts. Now these are really overreaching, these are sweeping, these are radical and quite all-encompassing views. So has that happened? That all of it has not happened, but the views were immediately embraced from both sides or all sides, especially on the end of spectrum. So on one side, the US policymakers, especially the George Bush and his new cons, they kind of embraced it, and on the other hand, even the extremists, the Al-Qaeda, I've actually read or heard, they are saying clash of civilization is happening, etc., etc. So this became the new mantra, and this really created a lot of fears, and this created a kind of a template that this is happening. And of course there was fear and there was apprehension and there was a lot of rejection, but a lot of acceptance of these views. My point is just that these views did not become a theory by some research. So there was a time, in that time Huntington explored an idea, that idea became very popular, he comes up with a book, and suddenly the books become very political, and now we are into that theory. But as student, we need to understand it, and of course we need to see that whether that is happening or not. One way of understanding is actually see the scholarship which has come against it, not the popular opinion but scholarship. So when we were studying in US, when I was studying in US and we studied this civilization and all these papers, our teachers actually recommended work which was against this, and academic work. So one of these work was Clash of Civilization or Realism and Liberalism, Deja Vu, Some Evidence, and this is paper by Russett and two other authors, O'Neill and Cox. Russett is from Yale University, the other two authors are from University of Alabama, and they actually call it that this doesn't hold. So how do they say that? They actually try to prove and conclude that after analyzing the conflicts between 1950 and 1992, right before this theory came, almost all of the conflict or most of the conflicts were a result of interstate differences, the old age differences like territory and like states infringing each other's rights or state interfering in each other's matters. So it was not like these civilizations at war. Same is with so many other scholarships. So my teacher used to say in US is to actually not accept it with certainty without analyzing it. On the other hand, here I've seen actually teachers and experts really saying it that it's true and it holds and it's a reality, etc., etc. In the West, wherever I have gone, I have seen academic really looking at it with a lot of suspicion, especially a theory as sweeping as this. So that is the way of approaching this theory or any other theory, that you understand the parts, you understand the context, you understand the author, you understand the other scholarship, and then make your opinion. You need not to reject it as a whole, you need not to accept it as a whole, but you see what is the point. Now, you might ask, what is my opinion on what is the point, whether it's a myth or reality? I think, of course, as a whole, I do not see this theory applying, but its part and kind of the indications it identifies are somewhere present. So to start with, I see that there is, of course, difference and there is distinction between when West meet the Islamic orthodoxy. West is really going towards more liberalism. There is acceptance or embrace of homosexuality. There is a lot of actually now feminism is accepted norm. More and more countries are embracing it. Role of women is actually on now equal to men. There is no doubt about that. While in the Islamic society, this debate has actually not settled, or actually somewhere not started yet. So whenever this does not translate into conflict or wars, but there is a difference of values. Secondly, what I see is that, and that Huntington actually very precisely indicating that in the later years, the Chinese, and by the way he calls Chinese civilization Confucian civilization, will be allies of Islamic civilization, and they will be pitched against the West. That kind of is happening too, and we see that there is actually difference between the Chinese and Western bloc is resisting as a whole, and there is a lot of competition, and even Western bloc is actually rejecting the Chinese technology at their own cost and peril. So there is economic angle, they are suffering, but still they are gathering and rallying around each other. So that is also seen. What is also seen is the Islamic countries' inner sectarian conflicts, even larger regional conflicts. So in the Middle East, we actually now the major conflict has transformed from Arab-Israeli conflict to KSA Iran conflict, in which there are blocks and there are actually so much bad blood. And that is also being seen. Fourthly, which is this, that the countries are, and this Huntington also identified as a kin country hypothesis, that the countries will be like relatives of each other. So the countries are now not really partners, but it is saying that brothers and all that. So that phenomena is also seen. So I see the hints of it, I see the traces of it, but as a whole, I do not see that really holding up or being applied. You can also have your own opinion, but first you have to see and understand. That is my message, and that is the spirit. Keep reading, keep thinking, keep giving the feedback. Take care of yourself. Thank you very much.